afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the California Small Farm Conference. We are getting ready to dive in to supporting the Back to the Land Black Farmer Exodus, and we are very lucky to have Ahmad here with us today. And if you want to engage, participate, just ask questions, or just introduce yourselves, I encourage you guys to use your chat function down below. We'd love to hear from you and find out who's here in the room. With that, I'm sure we got a lot to cover here today. So why don't you take it away? Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you, everyone, for choosing to spend your time here today. I am pleased and honored beyond words to have been invited or accepted this year. We'll talk a little bit about why I feel so honored outside of the honor itself. But I just wanted to start with a reminder to please keep your microphones muted. We do have an interactive session today, and I'm looking forward to listening to your responses and hopefully answering some questions. If not, then taking information, and I'll do my best to get back to you if there's something I can't answer on the meeting today. But that will come up, and I'll definitely cue to everyone when we'll be at that point. Until then, if you would please keep your microphones muted. And with that, we'll just get right into today's session while other folks flow in. So we're going to do a little bit of a presentation and a little bit of a talk. And so it's going to really kind of have a conversation is what I hoped. And really, I'm looking forward to the Q&A piece. There's a lot of time that I've been in for that. So we're going to go over some information kind of quickly, but it's not a lot of information. So I hope that you receive it in the way that it was prepared for you. So in anything that I do, I think it's important to always start with the root or the beginning, or as near to a beginning as can be ascertained. We are going to touch on some somewhat technical points. I'm a former paralegal, and I'm also a former educator in terms of being an instructional assistant, both for special needs and non-special needs. And so I'm very familiar with and very comfortable with the case study model. For anyone who's not familiar, that basically means where we're looking at actual cases. These aren't created cases. And we're looking at them to glean as much as possible nuggets, if you will, or kind of rules of thumb or paradigms, things along that nature. And so we will be looking at some policy cases, excuse me, just to get an understanding and a context of just how important policy for our kind of core subject today. And then we're going to be talking about ways moving forward to support Black farmers, Black ranchers, other producers that identify as Black and even BIPOC. But I wanted also to give attention to the fact that most of my preparation was in terms of Black farmers, and why that's important we'll kind of touch on as well. I know in my observation, a lot of times Black farmers gets lumped, and it's okay for reasons that we can address later. I'm just pointing out an observation, and this will be important later. A lot of times Black farmers gets lumped into the BIPOC, which is Indigenous and other people of color. And we'll talk about why it's important to really look at Black farmer and rancher data sets and data points as opposed to just the BIPOC kind of larger community. So I hope that that was a good preface. And also I kind of wanted to give other folks time to come in before we get into the main meat of it. But we will be going back over some kind of historical data, looking at some policy issues around land ownership. And we're going to also look at the phenomenon known as the Great Migration and look at how those concepts kind of play with each other and give us an opportunity, at least that I've perceived, moving forward to bring some equity to the space. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we should be able to see a presentation shortly. I wasn't able to confirm that I could be heard while the presentation was showing. And pardon me, that's probably just my error. It's my first Zoom presentation.
Yeah, we
I'm going to
can
try
hear you.
once more. Now, okay.
Yep.
And can you still hear me now?
We can still hear you. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Good, we got it going. All right, so this is kind of a snapshot of some of the things that really have given me joy. I came into the agriculture space in 2019. Like I mentioned earlier, I am a former paralegal. I've worked in different law offices for different types of law. And it really, really gave me a great understanding of research. And that became really valuable when I went into the agriculture space because it required a lot of research. My first idea was to homestead and have sheep and raise some produce. So I started to research and look into that as an opportunity. And as I did that, I learned about alpacas. And so my attention shifted there. And now they will be the primary livestock fiber animals that my family and I will raise. So I thought that this was a nice little collage to get us started. So welcome, welcome. My name is Ahmad Kofi Majid. I found out that my family's ancestry goes back to Ghana. And so Kofi is my cultural name that I go by as well. I am a beginning rancher farmer. And so God willing, what that means is my wife and family and I are going to raise both animals as well as produce to bring quality fiber and produce to the market. I also have the pleasure of serving as the National Women in Agriculture Association, California Central Valley Chapter President. I volunteer with several agricultural and agribusiness related community groups and committees, advisory councils, small farm and small ranch organizing groups, food systems networks, just really burrowed myself into the space. Once I learned many of the things that we'll go over today, and I saw the necessity for advocacy. In addition to that, just bare shelves and being shocked by the supply chain challenges that all of us observe at this point. And we're seeing a lot of that returning now. Egg prices almost $20 and things of that nature really rekindled kind of long forgotten what seemed like a dream. I grew up in East Palo Alto, California. That's in the Bay Area, roughly in the Bay Area. We consider it still Bay Area. And it's very removed from at least rural agriculture. I don't even remember community gardens. There probably were, but it just wasn't on my radar. But even that being true, ever since I was really young, I imagined that I would be a farmer. And it didn't really even make sense, except that there was a horse that lived not too far from where we lived, and I would pass by every day and kind of gesture to the horse. That was about as close as I got to any agriculture. But I had this sense that somehow I would be on a farm with my family and we would be living there. So some other stuff, I'm just leave that up for folks to kind of look over, just to give you an idea of how I got here and where some of my information comes from, the spaces that I've been really, really privileged to listen in and contribute to, the spaces that have poured into me. I got my start at the Central Valley Neighborhood Harvest Community Garden just as a volunteer way back in 2019 when I came back to Stockton. I was living in San Francisco at that time doing an internship, but the pandemic interrupted that. So when I got back home, I reconnected actually with Don Aguilar, a very well-known food justice advocate and community garden champion here in Stockton, California, where I'm based. And that volunteering just turned into an administrative role where, again, my training as a paralegal was helpful for a Black producer who is also partially disabled due to a condition. And so just coming into the space and seeing a need and being able to fill that need for someone I cared about was literally my entry into the space. And that's what continues to guide me moving forward. I was able to complete some of these other trainings, and my wife and I are completing a few more. As I mentioned, we do plan to have a ranch farm, and we're projecting about 2024, 2025, if everything goes to plan. But we know that hardly ever happens, but at least we have a plan. So one of my biggest accomplishments is this guy right here. I really, really love that he has taken wholeheartedly to agriculture. We take him with us now to the farm visits, the ranch visits, the community gardens, the different spaces that we're in as agriculture and agribusiness organizers. And I say that kind of with what's the word? It takes me aback because I have so much respect for folks who have been in the space and done so much more, but I'm allowing myself to see myself as that, especially from input from the community in terms of being in the space and bringing help to, again, mostly the Black farmers and producers that I have worked with directly. It's been incredibly heartwarming, and I'm so glad that my son enjoys it and he's able to come with us. All right, so what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to take a closer look. I'm not going to say deep dive because this type of work literally is still being studied at a very high level among a great number of groups and individuals, even consortiums, yes, even to that extent. And so it was actually pretty challenging to even select what to cover, to keep it concise enough, but also to cover enough to give a good snapshot at least. So we are going to be talking about issues of race. So I hope if that's a trigger that it won't be after this. It's just because we have to, as I mentioned in the beginning, understand the beginning so that we have an opportunity to move forward. So we are going to be looking at a lot of Black farmer and white farmer types of data sets or considerations. So I hope people are comfortable being uncomfortable, as Brene Brown says. So as a certified paralegal, I'm very familiar with case studies. So we are going to look at kind of like some agribusiness economy issues. Like this first point here in 1920, Black land ownership was approximately 15% of total farm land ownership. Today, that's about 1%. And where do we see most Black farming operations happening, or even ranch operations? For example, Central Valley Neighborhood Harvest, where I support, we have two sites. One's a community garden that's hosted at a school site, and another is a small, I think it's like 5-acre ranch. But it's neither of them are operated on property that Mr. Aguilar owns. I find that in my observation, in my experience, in my conversations, majority of Black producers are on land that is owned by others, even to this day. And it shows the importance of why we need to understand how that happened from 15% to 1%. And that leaves us where we are. A really, really incredible book that I read, and let me get it correct. The Warmth of Other Suns, The Epic Story of America's Great Migration, which was written by Isabel Wilkerson. I will send out some references. So if you're like me, you're feverishly trying to write notes, I'll send out most of the stuff that I mentioned. I'll try and send it out. But she did a wonderful job of chronicling what is now known as the Great Migration, which refers to a period from 1910 to 1970, where about 6 million Black Americans migrated from the South into different directions. We're going to look more at those who came out westward toward Los Angeles or San Francisco, or at least be thinking about that, because there were defined paths that these folks went on. It wasn't as if they landed in, a smattering of places. It's very trackable. And again, The Warmth of Other Suns is an incredible book that documents that in a nonfiction historical narrative. Really incredible. And so I learned from that book that there were even whites only Bibles to swear on in court. We are probably all familiar at this point with the types of life-threatening encounters over the simplest unintentional departure from those incredibly biased Deep South and segregated areas. For example, simply offering to shake the hand of a white man first and not having been invited was such an offense. We even see from, again, Ms. Wilkerson's book that there was an incredibly high cost of building 4 different bathroom facilities. Well, let's think back maybe for the younger ones of us here. Why would you need 4? One for Black men, one for white men, one for white women, one for Black women. And so I wanted to include that to demonstrate how both communities really, really were beholden to this really ridiculous standard. And you had business owners willing to pay that money to build out those extra facilities just to keep those social castes in place and those social norms in place. For me, this is important not to harp on it or to place blame, but to understand the context, to understand the reality that, again, principally we're focusing on Black farmers and Black community members, where they're living and what they have to live with, and how both policy that was written into law and policy that was upheld by communities created spaces where Black land ownership was very difficult to maintain. This I got from an American Bar Association article that was published January 2023. And it says that the reported cumulative value of Black land loss from 1910 to the present is about $326 billion. And it went on to say that, you know, in simple terms, that is a very conservative estimate. So how does something like that happen? And how do people recover from something like that? What I've seen in the space is a lot of innovation. I've seen, for those who are farming on land, they mostly don't own it. Even those who are, in order to be competitive, you're having to really, really work hard to be regenerative, even before regenerative was a thing. I'm seeing a lot of cooperative groups and organizations partnering together. That's something that I really advocate for. We're seeing community gardens almost everywhere, land-based learning institutions. People are doing market gardens in their backyards or just gardening for their own pleasure or their family's subsistence. And for those who are still on the land, we still see issues. I know right now in Colorado, there's a highly publicized issue of a Black ranch owner who's constantly being harassed by not only community members, but it's a great deal of reports that indicate it's likely, you know, just like in these past situations where you have even city officials creating a climate or environment where that sort of harassment is either overlooked or, in the worst cases, really supported or enhanced by paid officials. So if you haven't heard about that, I believe they are the Mallorys, a family out in Colorado. If you Google it, I'm sure you'll pop up something because it's been gaining a lot of popularity lately. And again, this is important not to say, well, you know, America hasn't changed or it's too hard for Black people to farm. It's just pointing out the reality of what Black farmers and ranchers have had to deal with, are currently dealing with, and what we as a larger community have the opportunity to extinguish, I would say. And this would be kind of the last piece, at least in terms of what we're going to frame our thinking around on policy, and how that looks and how that has a relationship with land ownership today. Most everyone has heard of the 40 acres and a mule. And if you haven't, it's basically a promise that was made that should have been granted to Black Americans following the formal ending of slavery. President Andrew Johnson overturned that almost immediately after assuming office. There again, we see a major policy that affected Black land ownership in a major way. Another piece to consider is that even though the Emancipation Proclamation did free slaves, at least in the letter, it didn't guarantee a right to own land. And there we have an example of just getting into the history of systemic disenfranchisement. These are things that we know now for sure. They should have been already understood, and I doubt that they weren't. I just honestly see it as an economic thing. It was a really, really beneficial economic relationship that had complex implications about undoing. And so it rolled out the way it rolled out. That's my personal opinion. But again, we see how policy plays a big factor. The Homestead Act of 1862 was only made available to whites here in the West, or non-Blacks. Another direct discrimination policy. There's literally hundreds of cases, thousands even, that John Boyd Jr. and the National Black Farmers Association have documented in the Pickford versus Glickman suit, which was, I think it was just over $1 trillion. No, 1.15 billion, something insane like that, where the USDA was, actually found to be committing systemic discrimination. So again, we're saying this to demonstrate a reality that we have to work from versus a lot of imagined types of, solutions that may not have this history in mind. There's a policy route to how we as Black farmers who don't own land got to be Black farmers who don't own land. And the last piece just has to do, in my personal opinion, with the trauma of that whole experience. And it's really, really disheartening that to this day we have the Mallory situation literally happening. I was developing this presentation right up until a couple of days ago. And I wondered if I should include it just because it's such a terrible story, but it also is a very real story. And it's what this presentation, before I even knew about that event, was really designed to educate folks about, so that moving forward, again, we have a real space, a real base to launch from. So here are some of the spaces, some of the ways that I would recommend for folks to take up and to learn about, to support wherever you can when you see Black producers in these spaces. A couple that I want to highlight, pardon me, have to do with career technical education and apprenticeships. I just came back from Oklahoma last week, and we were celebrating 15 years at the national headquarters of the organization that I'm a part of now, the National Women in Agriculture Association. And we have a couple of our members who work with a really cool intersection of STEM and agriculture, with tower gardens and aquaponics and hydroponics. Even I'm just learning about those and the differences between them. But just to see the excitement on the faces of young Black children and the interest in their voices, and they're asking questions, and they're interested in agriculture again, when, years past, you couldn't, you could hardly pay us to pull some weeds just from the trauma associated with the past relationship to the land and with the land. I know for me, my family is from Louisiana originally, and there was a land dispute even within our own family on how the land was supposed to be divided and how it should be handled. And many of my family members ended up in San Francisco because of that. They left Louisiana and came to San Francisco on my mom's side. On my father's side, similar, and they came from Alabama. So when I was reading the story, not the story, the account in The Warmth of Other Suns, and looking at this great migration and thinking about the motivations for people leaving everything they know to go somewhere completely brand new, and how they wanted to be as far away as possible, not just from the geographic South, but from the land relationship that they had in the South. I learned that cotton is a very finicky crop. It takes, or it requires, just the right amount of water, but not too much. And you have to be very patient in the harvesting and the processing of it. And when you understand that an entire economy was built on that, and you have labor leaving in droves, you get an understanding of the mechanism that would activate to try and keep that economy in place. And by no means is that meant to excuse what happened on the watch of our legislator decade after decade, but it, I hope, is a kind of sobering thought, and also, again, a place reminder of where we are now and how we have the opportunity to use the Farm Bill, which is coming up, use our voices in spaces where, Farm Bill related programs or opportunities are being discussed, to voice a need for, consideration for Black producers. And, unabashedly, it doesn't have to be BIPOC, because not everyone dealt with the same trajectory as Black farmers. And that's still the case today. So after career technical education, and that was kind of the tie-in with the STEM, and my observation, it really excites young people. And I think that it might have to do with the fact that it's not associated with sweating in the sun and pulling weeds. It's a different way to approach agriculture. I've also seen great interest by young people in the technology being used by NASA to locate groundwater, or drone technology to, complete a certain task of a survey your field, or different things in that space. And I'm really excited to be bringing those opportunities as well moving forward with our organization, and also apprenticeships. I was really, really encouraged. And if you're still on, brother Thomas, I appreciate you. One thing that we really, really want to do is to create those pathways to rural agriculture, because for reasons we've mentioned, a lot of Black agriculture happens in urban spaces, which is fine if that's one's choice. But it's my perspective that that's not the choice of most producers. That's an effect of some of the things that we've touched on very lightly today. And I encourage folks to do their own research. But I see that as kind of unavoidable fact. When you're looking at 15% land ownership to 1%, and the context of how that, and now, to me, it's kind of a red flag. moving forward, I'm going to come back. Can you see? Stop that. So now I'm back. So that is the presentation that I prepared for today. I do have a bunch of time for question answer. If I'm going to be looking down, so I was off in the chat. But if someone, well, I look there, I'm happy to listen. We'll go through and read some of the chats.
Ahmad, you're breaking up a little bit. I wonder if your internet connection is having some issues. Maybe if you take a moment and just turn off your video, that might help with the connection for just a moment.
To begin to speak. If you are, I think there's a. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, is that better?
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I was saying that I'm going to just kind of look through the chat. If there's someone who has a question that they want to verbalize, please feel free. So I hope you can hear. I see one that popped up. Yes, the Black Farmers Rising. I'm sorry, the National Black Farmers Association, which is headed by John Boyd. You can Google that. I will put together a resource list and I'll email that out to everyone because we have that handy tool. But if you just want to look it up, the National Black Farmers Association is headed by Mr. John Boyd and his wife, Kara Boyd. They are incredible people. I'll put in the chat the Pigford versus Glickman if you want to research that. Incredible case that documents, and again, the value of it is not to point a finger, it's to understand the resiliency that has been demonstrated and continues to be demonstrated by Black farmers and producers, and the ability to hold on, at least in the cases where it was. And I hope that it really helps people to understand why you don't see Black participation in even a lot of programs, why you don't see a lot of Black producers able to come to meetings, you know. And that's, again, why I do what I do. When I go and sit with them and I look at their faces and on their property and with their animals and being informed by the research that I completed for today, it really lets me know that I'm engaged in meaningful work. And it's the reason I've exited from my career work, you know, in terms of what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. So yeah, Pickford versus Glickman, it's there in the chat. I'm gonna try and read through the chat too. Again, it keeps moving. So if someone put a question in the chat that you want to ask, feel free, or use the raise hand feature too, so we can kind of keep it organized to some bit. But we have quite a bit of time, and I wanted to really hear from folks. I see Amber. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Hi, Ahmad. Thank you so much for your presentation and just your energy in your space. It's so positive. And I want to thank you for being so deeply involved in CAFF programs. And my question is, how can folks that that want to be aligned and supporting Black farmers, you know, what can they do? Like, is there good legislation that we can support as individuals or within collaboratives, farming operations, et cetera? Or like what's on the horizon, so that, yeah, we can just keep those things in mind and be able to support those efforts.
Great question. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you enjoyed. I know that you have a very wise ear. I don't really want to say a particular policy that I advocate for, but I would say that for folks who have connection, ask the producers, ask the farmers, ask the ranchers, ask those representatives. I say this humbly, but I have to say, like, well, I won't. So there are advocacy groups, there are Black farmer cooperatives, even the National Black Farmer Association, a group that I'm a part of in California, California Black Farmers Rising. We're an advocacy group that is organizing around some of the issues we've touched on. I feel like, because I've learned policy is so important, wherever you can align with people who are doing policy work, either BIPOC or Black people who are doing the work themselves, or those who are in the space on behalf of Black or BIPOC producers, I would say would be a good connection to make. I try as much as possible now to talk with farmers. Nos enseña, ¿verdad? Si nosotros queremos participar en farmers markets y aprendemos de sus historias. Tania. I was good. Okay, thank you. But that would be my best answer to that, is to locate folks who are in the space, or you could also connect with me. You can, I think they'll allow us to copy the chat. So if you want to get connected to more specific work, I'll do that offline in a different hat than the one that I'm wearing today. But thank you so much, Amber, for that great question. And I see, pardon me if I mispronounce, Cheryl Nell.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmad. You pronounced that correctly, which is amazing considering my mother was 17 and didn't know how to spell it.
Hey, I remember you.
Yeah. I wanted to note that in the Central Valley, the African American Farmers of California is located in Fresno. They have monthly meetings, and there's a 20-acre demonstration farm site. I also believe, and I think Ahmed knows even more about this, that there is going to be an African American Farmers Conference in Fresno on April the 21st. Am I correct, Ahmad?
Yes, that is correct on both accounts. Thank you for that reminder. Those are the types of things that escape a person when presenting. So thank you very much. I'm going to put that on my follow-up email list. So I'm going to send that information out to folks. And Cheryl, was that your comment, or did you have anything more to add? You still have your hand up.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just am lazy when it comes to putting it back down because my dog's barking at me.
Well, that's a good excuse. I got to take mine out too. And thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Yes, the Black Farmers Conference is happening in April. The 21st, I believe, is the date. They are planning it now. I had the pleasure of having a conversation on one of the planning events. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be really, really great. And I will put that in the resources email, along with some of the references and links to the kind of historical policy issues and situations that we discussed today. I didn't make any of that up. All of it is actual. And I think, again, it's really important to understand that need, that challenge, that opposition still exists today, but so do we. And everyone that I've met in the space is so different from that. But I just think it's important to understand the reality of that, there are still folks in the world who just don't want, I don't even really know, and I can't say what they want. But if you're harassing folks who are just trying to grow, raise cattle, that's just weird. I think Chi Zo, is that correct?
Yes. Thank you. You are great for pronounce different names.
I met you before too.
Yes, we have. I just have a question. This is Chizo from California Association of Resource Conservation District. I'm the Equity and Diversity Program Manager, and I'm interested attending the Black Farmers Conference. I have been looking for information for months, and finally I find this opportunity. But I cannot find more information through the online, like the agenda, what kind of presenters will be there, and if it's possible that our organization can be a partnership organization or sponsorship or for presentations or whatever. So I'm just want to ask, do you know more information about that? Or anyone?
Okay. It's actually, the agenda is still being developed. Well, it's developed more or less. It's just not finalized and published. So you'll probably be hearing about it in the weeks before, which is March 1st now, or a little more than a month out. So I would imagine, and I'm not like an official planning committee person. I just know from the last time. So you'll probably be seeing it. You registered, and so your information is on the list. So I'm going to send a blast with the updated facts that I can find out about that. But I think also in the next coming days, you might be able to find something publicly online.
Okay, great.
And in particular, if you send me a direct message, Chi, I can connect with you in terms of the vendor piece. Hopefully expedite your request to someone.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. And your email is that mrcoffeesir@gmail.com?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Okay, would Black Farmers Conference be as useful? So I see Marie, pardon me, Elise, she put a question in the chat. Would the Black Farmers Conference be as useful for Black urban growers as well as rural? Yes, absolutely. That was a major piece in the couple meetings that I attended, and just recognizing the need to give special attention really to both. Kind of like for some of the stuff we talked about, how Black farming and Black production in agriculture is happening now in the world. It's a pretty big split. The majority is urban, and it might look like municipal spaces like the edible schoolyard At least that's how they started, or city-owned land, or agreements with schools like the community garden that I still work at. So yes, there's definitely content that's being developed for urban growers, as well as rural growers, and not even a lot of times we don't fertilize or put forth our ranchers, our livestock producers. So that is intentionally included as well. Even I'm learning now about small community grazing groups. So there's another piece in terms of urban livestock that, last week I didn't know about. I went to a range management conference that I found out about being a member of the CAFF Wildfire Resilience Advisory Council last year, connected with the Range Management Advisory Committee chairperson, a wonderful woman, Dr. Wolf, incredible, just really detailed. I love her minutes, her meeting minutes. But at a conference there, I learned about that community grazing for fire adaptation. So there's like really great opportunities. And I was even able to ask a question, how do small herd ranchers get involved in the space? And lo and behold, there are like spaces where they just need 1 cow or 10 goats, so there's an opportunity for our small urban and BIPOC. I definitely represent both spaces, but my intentional work today was just to lift the particular Black farmer plight. So thank you for that question. Oh, cool. And that's some work that Miss Mary or Marie is doing as well. So cool. And I'm still looking through the chat. Go ahead, Amber. I might have a second to catch up on.
Just a perfect segue. I was curious about why you decided alpacas. So if you want to tell us about your inspiration there.
That's a really fun question. I love it. So it was actually literally because they're adorable. That was the first main thing. And I'm not even kidding. And then, I got married since then and had a son, like you saw him on there. And so I had to justify it beyond that. And so I found out some characteristics about their fiber that make it a lot easier to process. In comparison to sheep, alpacas do not have lanolin, which is kind of like a combination of grease and sweat. And so if we're thinking about furry, fluffy fiber that's also greasy and sweaty, and you have to shear it and get all the vegetable matter out and take it through its processes of getting combed out and then fluffed back together, or if you're going to turn it into yarn or roving, or if it's going to be used for something else, so many different arts and crafts, adaptations and uses for the fiber. It just makes it a lot easier. In addition, in terms of their body size, they're much lighter on the land. They are very, very, what's the word? They're easy to feed, both in terms of how much they eat. Like if you were to weigh it, it's not a lot, but also they convert it into nutrition very efficiently. So if you just fed them hay, they would be pretty fine. But if you're supplementing as well, especially if you're using quality stuff, they're really, really efficient, I guess is the word I want to say. I'll kind of almost ease back, but in terms of production. And then finally, I learned that their manure is called alpaca beans, and it's one of the cleanest. Like, it doesn't actually even stink. I kid you not, it does not smell bad. And if you're a compost person like I am, you saw that in one of those early slides. It's one less stink factor. And I'm even really interested to learn about the research aspects of the different biome that you get when you use alpaca manure, say versus chicken or cow manure. So if you know of any extension people who are looking to do alpaca manure related research, I do have a mentor in Point Reyes, and she has a herd of about 300. I go out there once a year, at least for shearing. If there's a unique birthing situation or things mostly around husbandry, I work with her for that. And yeah, that's how I chose alpacas. Thank you for that question. I love to answer that question because they are, oh, and there's two types, like the really fluffy ones are called wakaya, and the ones that kind of have ringlet, curly hair, those are suri. So I like both.
Awesome. Thank you. Learning so much.
Do you have to consider predation? Of course. Thank you for that question. I see from Olivia, do you have to consider predation with your alpacas? Yes, absolutely. They have no defense. Well, their only defense is to spit or to kind of make a screaming sound. They don't run very fast. They're not very large, and they're not very aggressive typically. So they are 100% like domesticated. They don't survive very long in the wild. Even they can't shear themselves, and they're not like some sheep where it just falls off. So they do have to be stewarded very closely. What we are doing is planning out our guard stock, excuse me, guardian dogs, guardian livestock dogs. My wife likes the Borbals, and I like the Pyrenees. We're going to see which ones we end up with. And then, fencing also helps with that. And I think too, really just having them on a good plan and with those inputs in terms of the guardian dog and fencing, it tends to handle, at least what I've seen in the industry and from the folks that I'm in contact with in terms of people who actually have herds and where they are. So yes, there are predation concerns, but you work around that. For me in California, my biggest issue is the heat. They are from the Andes area, like South America. So they prefer more mountainous topography and climate. So one of the biggest concerns for the couple of ranch owners who I know in the valley is heat related. So they're doing unique things from cooling systems with agrivoltaics, which is like basically solar powered energy to power at least that piece. Different types of mist technology, similar with agrivoltaics. A lot of interesting stuff that, again, I think attracts a lot of the younger people and is a good, I like to lift those things when I'm talking to younger people as the different pathways and avenues to come into agriculture that don't necessarily have to do with the physical labor part. Not everyone is attracted to that. So yeah, that's another little side piece to alpacas. And cool, Mary. I see you're into alpacas as well. That's really cool. I hope you reach out and keep in touch. I love to meet alpaca people and see what they're up to, what they're doing, what their why is. I'm gonna keep looking through the chat here. It's moving pretty quickly. Do they have? Okay, here's one I could read really quickly. Do you have a preliminary sense of your startup costs, your future farm ranch? Do you have a preliminary sense of your start? Oh, it was double. Okay, so Yes. I recommend anybody who's new or beginning, and the USDA definition is 10 years or less. I'm down at like 0 minus. So, but this has been really
Did we lose you? Think we may have lost him. One moment, folks. Let's see if we can get his audio working again. Thanks for your patience, folks. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you can, your audio is cut out. So I'm not sure if there's anything you can do with your connectivity. Let's see if maybe give him just a little bit further. I don't know, Ahmad, if you want to maybe log out and log back in. If you can hear me. I don't know if in the meantime, anybody else would like to. Oh, there he goes. He's back on.
So it looks like I got disconnected.
Okay, great. You're back. Thanks.
Sorry about that, folks. So I was last talking about the SCORE mentors. I'm not sure how much people heard, so I'll pick up there. The question was about the business plan, and I think like how much of it is worked out. So basically what we've done is we're still working on it because we're doing a combination. It's bear with me, I'm just learning the language. Diversified livestock and produce ranch. And that just means that you're going to have animals as well as raised produce. And so when we're thinking in terms of a for-profit business, what we're doing now, my wife and I, is breaking down all of the different operations, and they really, from what we understand, need to be looked at as individual operations. So for example, we're going to have a small apiary, probably not producing commercial honey in the beginning. We're mostly doing it because of what we've learned about pollination and biodiversity on your farm and really creating an ecosystem on your farm. However, we do plan to, God willing, have some honey for the market. So even with that, we have to scale each of those operations. My wife does herbs, egg chickens, and the apiary. I'm studying and preparing for the crops piece and the animal husbandry piece. And so all of those really have to be looked at as individual operations that collectively create your operation. That's what we're doing based off our research and the guidance that we've gotten from our SCORE mentor. And then like all the ranch owners and the farmers and folks that, you know, we have the benefit of talking to, since, you know, we're in the space as organizers and like outreach and technical assistance. So I see, how big is your farm? We have not purchased yet. We did meet with our real estate agent and our loan officer and our the person in the rural development office, because that's the finance route that works and makes sense for us. And so we're looking at something from 7, maybe 10 acres, at least to get started. And we do hope to have more than one farm. And so the first farm operation is not going to necessarily include the alpacas, because with that limited amount of acreage, it really doesn't lend itself to livestock, at least not ours. The metric that I use for alpacas is 3 per acre. It's a general rule of thumb in the industry. And so there's not much that I would be able to do with like 9 alpacas. So we're not going to really start there. We're going to scale up from the produce farm. At least that's our business plan. But yes, I would encourage folks who are new or beginning to really look at their operations in terms of, you know, what are you going to produce, even down to the single crop. It's just beneficial in so many ways, especially what we've learned in terms of tax filing and business planning, really beneficial. That's a great question. How big is your farm? I kind of went over that. We're looking at under 10 acres to start. If something really, really interesting happens that I can't foresee, we'd be interested in that. It kind of goes back to what we talked about too. You know, funding is an issue, land access is an issue, land cost. So we're just being very practical about what we can scale and operate. And so that's where we're planning. In the Central Valley, we have been looking in a few of the areas, Madera, outskirts of Merced. To be honest, for those who understand, we're a little concerned just because of water access in the valley. It's a pretty tough situation in terms of water and wells and that whole situation. So we're also looking at other areas of the United States if this area doesn't lend itself to something workable. Excuse me. Well, Doctor or D, if you send me, I hope that the first part was preserved. I'm not sure because the first part of my chat disappeared when my connection failed. But for anyone who wants to reach out, I'll put my direct contact information in the chat again. And I'm happy to talk with folks, do farm visits, whether it be to talk about opportunities. Oh, so maybe a good time for that while we have a little bit of time left. So the Central Valley chapter of the National Women in Agriculture Association, our primary target audience is women. Right after that, at-risk youth. And then after that, we work with anyone who kind of has need or desires. So if folks are, excuse me, are interested in, or they know people, especially rural farmers and ranchers. And that's just me personally. I'm really setting up our chapter to be that on-farm support. Again, recognizing the challenges that all producers in the agriculture space face. It's always a race against time. I was visiting with, or rather, I was talking with a small herd owner at the range management conference, and it had gotten started a little late. And I looked around the room, and he was the only one still there. So I went over and I talked to him, and he told me about his ranch operation, and he was like looking at the door. I'm like, I know you got animals to feed. You got weeds to pull or stuff to do. And I'm really glad you came. Let's just wait. And then we waited, and the conference got started, and he got some really valuable information. So I say that to say I really love to work with rural ranchers, because it's a little harder, even like everything that's hard in the urban space. Just imagine you're 20 miles out, or, you have to balance being at a listening session at the right time to give your public comment, but you have lambs being birthed, or especially livestock. Now, it's understandable as well when we're talking about crops, but when you are, a steward of animals and life, and that's typical of what I'm seeing, you're going to choose your animals, you're going to choose your farm. And so a lot of times they don't get to make it to those spaces, or they don't have the time to read this grant opportunity or figure out if they qualify for this thing or that thing. So our Central Valley chapter, we're definitely here to help. A lot of support in terms of NRCS, FSA, and USDA. Our national headquarters has official partnerships with all three. So we have very good education about their programs, additional support in navigating those programs, understanding those programs. For other organizations, we are very excited to begin to network and talk with folks who would like to work with our organization in a number of ways. And I would be happy to talk about that with anyone who's interested. Let me see, Wendy Flowers, California. Yes, California Women for Agriculture. I'm familiar with that group as well. We often are confused with that group, but not the same. However, I do personally support California Women for Agriculture. Just my personal observation of their work. And so Wendy has placed some information in the chat. They have statewide meetings throughout the year. Looking for guest speakers. Oh, well, that's for me. Yes, Wendy, that would be a wonderful opportunity to connect, and I will do that. Let me put that. And I hope too, Wendy, that you take my information. It's a couple of the chat bubbles up from yours, just in case we get disconnected again or something happens. Chi, thank you for the reminder. I'm going to send you my email address. I'm going to send it to you directly.
Thanks.
Of course. And yes. Okay, I see, excuse me, another question. From your perspective as a former paralegal, with Charles and Willa Bruce succeeding in winning their land back in Manhattan Beach, do you think the precedence has been established strong enough to continue providing land back to Black families throughout the state? Oh, that's a really great question, Olivia. I don't feel like I know enough to answer it. I know very briefly about that instance. I didn't follow it very closely. The only thing that I really know, honestly, is that there was some land, and it was temporarily back in the hands of some owners who were, I think, Black, and then they sold it. And I'm not even certain if that's the scene, but that's just about what I understand about it. So I would have to look into that to be able to give an educated answer. I will be happy to know what you think about that. If you would connect with me, I really, really am, and it sounds funny, but I'm really, really considering even going back to law school once I get settled. And I don't really care to practice law necessarily. I might just do it because I've been a paralegal, and I kind of stepped back from law school for several reasons. But I love any opportunity to talk about legal cases, which is kind of what led me to today, just being able to look at policy and seeing how attitudes and communities are able to shape policy for better or worse. And so, like, again, even where we are now, the opportunity for, us as the larger ag community to shape policy for the better. Yes, ma'am. Marie, the floor is yours. I see your hand raised.
Hi, guys. Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, the interesting article, because I know a lot of us were very disappointed the family sold the land back to LA County. But the article laid out why that reasoning is, and it's something that we definitely have to look at when in terms of reparations. There was no way for the family to develop the land. So it was like a gift with a 100-pound weight on it. So you have to look at justice from all sides, and it's really frustrating that the family was stuck with that, and then they'd be stuck with how many decades would it take for them to be able to change policy and land, around land use. So that's just something to think about.
Really great point. And that's, I'm not surprised. My father is a real estate agent as well. He's been in real estate for like 20 years. So I definitely know what you mean, especially like a lot of people don't know even the need varies according to what type of property you have, even if we're just talking about simple maintenance. And when you're talking about a beachfront property, which I think it was, there's so many different things to understand in terms of the water relationship and topography. And even we saw with the infrastructure concerns when the flooding happened, you cannot assume something like that lightly. And it's also true when you're talking about agricultural property, which is why, my wife and I took a step back and decided to get education up front. I've seen and I know people personally, and I respect very much folks who choose to go it this way. Like, let's just get on the land and figure it out. If that works for you and it's scalable and, you have the bank account for that or the tools or the know-how, then great. But I think that's a really great point to bring up. And thank you for bringing it up, because it kind of goes back to the circumstances and the environment in which Black land ownership is realized or not. Like a lot of things, it's difficult. It's very difficult and complex. I think I've spoken to about as much of that as I can without beginning to ramble. But I just, again, thank you. That's a really great point.
You're welcome. It's very sad, but very true.
Yeah, my dad too, he had a piece of property here in Stockton, and he didn't even tell me about it until after he sold it, really. And I'm like, but he sold it because he didn't really know what to do with it. And people were dumping on it. And he was trying to keep it up in the space of also being a real estate agent. And that was kind of one of the first spaces where I kind of learned about too, like when you acquire property, the time commitment, the other commitments that go along with it that, it's not often discussed. And then now I'm thinking like, well, that's a pro.
Oh, I lost you. Uh-oh.
I think we may have lost you again.
No. Well, somebody did put the New York Times thing, so you guys can read it.
Well, we'll see if Ahmad can get back in time, but we're coming up close on time here. But
Figure out solutions or ways forward when I did from Evan for.
Oh, are you there? Ahmad?
Okay, I'm
All
back again. Thanks to the 29 folks who are sticking around. And there were some questions in the chat that disappeared. If you want to put your questions again, I was beginning to read a question from Evan. It was a question about connecting for support. At least that's what I was able to read. Oh yeah, there it is. Good job. Thank you. For Black urban farmers, for those interested in transitioning to rural farming, what are the major obstacles they face? What are goals and strategies you're seeing in this regard? Good question. I think a lot of the challenges, like we kind of touched on with Marie's question, the lack of reality, and a lot of people, and again, I totally respect it if you can do that, or if you just feel comfortable, or if you have those skills to know, how this plant grows, or when you should harvest it, or how do you scale an operation for for productivity in terms of profitability. It's very different to have a hobby farm and to be in farming for business. So I would say what I've observed in my journey and in different conversations with people at different spaces on that journey, it tends to be around the husbandry related piece, whether it's the crops or the animals. If folks are starting in the urban space, if I'm understanding your question correctly, then maybe they've grown crops before in whatever capacity, whether it's herbs in your windowsill or a garden bed in your backyard. That obviously takes a little of the gradient off in terms of scaling up to be able to get into production agriculture, again, as distinct from hobby farming. Because there are folks who, I know a couple too, like they hobby farm with their retirement money, and they sell some stuff, but it's not like they're in business for profit 7 days a week or even 5 days a week. Like they're literally retired and they can live on land and be around the horses that they like. So, and again, in my observation, my experience, people who are going into agriculture for profit, challenges that I see for myself and others, obstacles as well, just have to be around or have been around understanding their processes, understanding their operations from a business perspective. In terms of goals or strategies, I would refer back to getting signed up, and maybe that got cut off, getting on different email lists. CSU Chico has a regenerative ag program. I love regenerative even before it was a name, a thing, because it really, to me, it points to a lot of Aboriginal and Indigenous stewardship truths. I myself am of African descent, as well as American Indigenous, so-called Indian descent. And just the knowledge that we have orally, with all due respect, it's beyond organic, it's, beyond regenerative. It understands and respects the relationship between water and soil and human and animal. And, when we really go back to that, it opens up so much wisdom, so much simple wisdom, but it's so profound. For example, I was recently connected with a beekeeper who utilizes indigenous beekeeping knowledge, and something as simple as your base for your smoker. So for those who don't know, when you're harvesting honey, you may even conjure the image in your head. Now you've seen people in those all white suits, and they have a metal can and they're spraying some smoke. That is a practice that notifies to the bees to kind of clear out and give you space to harvest. I never thought about it until I was in conversation, and we're up to the last couple minutes, so we'll close with this. And I was listening to her, and she was describing how she selects her sticks. And it's not sticks. She uses a certain sage, I believe, and I think a floral. Anyway, just the thoughtfulness to think about that down to that level of how you're going to make your smoke mix, and how that even communicates differently to the bees, or even if you use it, harvest after harvest, maybe it might contribute to the flavor. I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying, like, when you start to think from that perspective, which is, rooted in ancient indigenous Aboriginal truths, you really open up some simple genius. Okay, and I see one new question that we'll spend our last minute on, and thank you all in advance for sticking around and showing up. It says, maybe an odd question, since farmers tend to be a median age of 60 plus if they have children, but who are not interested in carrying on the farm, is there a matchmaking program to set up farmers with Black farmers? Another form of building community building, finding a way to make it financially viable for both farmers to transition ownership. I don't know of anything that specific, but there are, like FarmLink is one. It's not as specific as, trying to match Black farmers, but there are landowner organizations that seek to match up with folks who intend to farm. Maybe that's a new network that could be built out. I think something like that would have legs and teeth, especially in California. California is kind of leading in a lot of new farmer and Black farmer equity related projects and programs. So maybe that's a calling for you to answer, Ms. Marie. If you feel that, definitely include me in the party. I would love to help. And thank you to everyone also. I'm seeing acknowledgements of gratitude in the chat. I'm also incredibly grateful to have been invited. I hope that you've enjoyed and enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the conference. Do take care.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming and participating. We hope to see you at the next workshop.